Now you're looking at the Appalachian Mountains of North America, said to be among the oldest mountains in the world. And so much time and so much history has happened here. Some things are etched in time forever, and some is among us still today. And I often wonder what the Native Americans witnessed long before anybody else set eyes on these mountains. And in these old mountains, when the sun goes down, the mood seems to change. And there's things in these mountains that are with us today that don't want to be seen. And some things that have been witnessed just can't be explained. So welcome to another story of the Unexplained Mountain Mystery. Well, this here story is from the Great Smoky Mountains. This is the most visited park in the country, with over 15 million yearly visitors. But this part of the park we're talking about in the Smokies is on the western end, Cades Cove. Beautiful place, heaven on earth here. And here's a loop map of it. If you not know anything about it, nestled right in the foot of the mountains, Smoky's little valley. And if you know anything about this place, you'll know what you're looking at right now. It is a busy place in the summer. Somebody sees something, they're backed up for miles on this loop road. But it didn't used to be that way. This is a peaceful place. Here's a picture of back in the early 1900s, before the park took. There was 700 people here at one time, 137 homes, 12 cemeteries, 4 churches, not counting barns and sawmills and little stores. Nice little community. But the park acquired all this land and made it a national park, the Great Smoky Mountains part of it. Now I'm going to share with you a little story of a friend. His family, the McCulley family, is from the Cove. They go back 3 generations in this Cove. So I'm going to share with you his little story. Well, hello, friends. I'm here in Maryville, Tennessee, Blount County, here with a good buddy of mine. He's going to share a few stories with me about the old Smoky Mountains here. His people's from Cades Cove. His grandfather born and raised there, and so is his dad. But anyway, this is John McCulley. And he's just an old mountain man himself. So I'm going to let him share a few stories with you. I hope you enjoy them. Now, these stories he's about to tell happened in Cades Cove, on top of the Smokies, and just outside of the park of the Smoky boundaries. But there's so many nice little stories. And they are true stories that's passed down through generations. Now, keep in mind, as he tells these little stories, I'll try to recreate the best I can of what he's talking about. Now, John, your people come out of these old Smoky Mountains, and there's still wilderness up there, even with the National Park Service got it. But they don't want to admit a lot of these old stories. But you being old mountain men from these mountains, you know you've had a lot of stories passed down to you. You told me one about your dad and your grandpa going up there camping up Spence's Field and hearing a woman scream or something. You want to tell that little story?
Yeah, my daddy told me this one time. We got to talking about whether there was any painters in them mountains.
Now, what's a painter? A lot of people say, what's a painter?
Well, it's not somebody that takes a brush and paints a house.
No, it's an old mountain term.
It's what mountain people, and I growed up calling them that. That's a panther, puma, mountain lion, cougar.
All the same.
All the same thing.
Wampus cat.
Yeah. But a lot of people look at a panther as being, you know, a black cat. Well, it could be, but chances are it'll be that tan color. You know, that's the most common. But they have been in these mountains, and they may still be some. They're so elusive, you know. It's hard to see them. But Daddy said when he was a boy, and if you listen to that tape of Grandpa McCauley that Donnie's got out called the John McCauley Story, that guy that's interviewing him from the Knoxville Journal, it's about an hour long, the whole thing. And Grandpa tells about the way they might go in the mountains there and on a hunt, and he said be back in there around dark, and he said just wherever it got dark on them, they just built them up a fire and laid down there. Well, Daddy was with his daddy, and they was on the mountain. I don't know what they was doing. He didn't say whether they was hunting or doing what, but it got dark. It began to get dark on them, and they built them up a fire, and they just there somewhere on the mountain, and they was just going to lay down by that fire and sleep that night. They may have been turkey hunting or squirrel hunting. I don't know what they was doing, but Daddy said he would have been probably just a big old boy, you know, 11, maybe 12, and he said he laid down there, and he said Grandpa laid down on the other side of the fire, and he said the fire died down a little bit, and Daddy said I was still laying there with big eyes. He said I was just hearing everything, listening to the sounds out in the woods, and he said I thought Dad was asleep. And he said, I was laying there, and he said, there's something cut loose. And he said, I never heard nothing like that in my life. And he said, he'd squalled, and he said, it sounded like a woman screaming. And he said, he just laid there scared to death. He thought his dad was asleep. Well, he said, Grandpa, the fire died down, but he said, Grandpa raised up and spit in the fire there. I guess he had a little snuff in his mouth or something. He raised up and spit in the fire. Well, Daddy knowed he was awake then, and he asked him, he said, Dad, what was that? And he said, Grandpa told him, he said, I don't know. And Grandpa spent his life in them mountains. He's heard everything you could hear, every sound of every wild animal, every bird. He's heard everything. He said he'd never heard that before. And he told Daddy, he said, if it wasn't a painter, he said, I don't know what it was. He said, I've never heard that before. And he knowed it wasn't no bobcats. They'll make some awful sounds, and bobcats will, especially in mating season, just like an old house cat. But he had never heard nothing like that in his life.
Had he ever seen anything?
No, he had never seen nothing like that.
Did you say you had a buddy that seen one on a trail one time up there on the mountain?
My brother used to walk. He got to hiking some with this friend of his. Well, he was raised in our neighborhood. I knowed him too. And they used to hike them trails a lot. And this boy went by himself one day. And he went up on Boat Mountain, like you go into Spencerville on that trail, on Smoky there. And when you walk them trails, you'll look way up ahead of you, and you'll see a switchback up there, a holler or something that comes up there. And it's just following along under the ridge. And he said there was a switchback way up ahead of him. He said he's looking up a trail, and he said there was something come off of the bank. He seen it coming off of the bank into the trail. And he described it. He said it looked like it was, 4 or 5 foot long. And he said its tail was as long as it was. And he said it was kind of a tan, brownish color.
Yeah.
And he said it just paused a little bit in the road, then it went on off the bank down the mountain. Time he got up there, it was gone. But when he described it, it sounded just like a painter, one of them mountain lions. So they still some around. And
there's too many witnesses. It don't matter if it's in the Smokies or up where I'm from, up around Cumberland Gap, or up in Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
they're not plentiful. They're far and in between, but I believe they've been in these mountains forever.
I do too.
They're so rare, you know.
Yeah, I do too. I believe there's been sightings on trail cameras and documentation of them down in West Tennessee, and of course I know they tried to restock some in Florida. It was a smaller size mountain lion, but it was.
Well, you know, you talk to the wildlife people for year after year, they tell everybody you don't know what you're looking at. There's no such a thing.
Yeah.
Well, they know better than that. They know better than anybody. They just won't tell the public that. But anyway, that's the story on that. And there's just so much history that's being forgotten. So thank you for that one, John.
All right.
John, we've talked about the panthers now, as rare as they are. Something that's even rarer in these old mountains, and it don't have to be just in the Smokies, is what something they call a Bigfoot, a skunk ape, or a Sasquatch, or there's too many sightings of that too. There's got to be something to it, but they've got a gift that they don't want to be seen. You'll walk right by them, I think. But you know any stories about that, John?
Yeah, I'm kind of like you on that, Donnie. I ain't never seen nothing like that. Until I see one, I wouldn't say whether there's anything like that or not.
Well, that's me too. I've had stuff go by me, but I couldn't see it. I mean, just tearing up the woods. I've done videos on that. But I didn't know what it was, but I never did because I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, well, it come within 20 yards of me, and I could not see what it was. It wasn't want to be seen. I don't know. So what about your grandpa seeing stuff like that in these old mountains?
Well, the only thing I ever heard that he ever seen that he couldn't explain, and this is another story my daddy told me, that his dad told him years ago. Grandpa and them, they had a little girl.
Yeah.
And she died when she was about 2, I think, with diphtheria or typhoid fever. I think it was going around in the cove. There's a lot of babies' graves over there right around them years. And if I can out-talk that mockingbird, I think I can talk him down. He's been here for a month now, wanting to find him another mate, and he's a hollering, and I can't get him to shut up. But anyway, what happens, me and Daddy was riding around the cove one time, and on the back side of the loop coming out, they evidently, them old roads in there must have traveled pretty close to where that road was at. And Daddy showed me a place along there, and he said, I believe right here is about where Dad seen that white thing. And I said, your dad seen a white thing? And he said, yeah. He said, Dad told me one time, said he was riding his horse through here, and it was after dark. And what he was doing, he was taking a sack of corn to this feller. This feller had a still and was making some whiskey. And him and Grandpa was kind of in on it together. And of course, I don't care for people knowing if my grandpa made a little whiskey. Just about everybody in them mountains did. But he was furnishing this guy, and this guy was doing the making, and they was in halves on it. So Grandpa was taking a sack of corn to him. And he was riding his horse along there about where Daddy showed me, and he said there was something white. Daddy didn't say how big Grandpa said it was, but he said it was of a big enough size. He knowed it wasn't a coon or a skunk or something like that. But he said there was something white come up in the road out in front of him and went up the bank, went on into the woods. And he said he had a horse that had never spooked at nothing. He said that horse wouldn't balk at nothing. You've seen horses that see a stump along the trail and they'll, jump back at it. He said his horse had never spooked at nothing. But he said he like to never got that horse to go by that spot. And he said to this day, he didn't know what that was. But what was strange about it, it wasn't long after that little girl of theirs passed away with that fever. And Grandpa he quit fooling with that stuff then. He said he felt like that was a sign to him, you know, that you're doing wrong and you don't need to be doing what you're doing. And he said then that little girl died. He felt like that was kindly a sign from the Lord on that. So
like premonition or something.
yeah, that was the story on
We're
that.
talking about some strange things in these mountains. You told me about an old hunter you knowed here. He's gone now, bless his soul. He hunted, he's seen some strange things, even a Bigfoot he claimed one time. You want to tell a little bit about him?
Yeah, I'll not mention no names, but this old guy, he spent a lot of time in the woods. He loved to be in the woods and in the mountains, and he was always, you know, doing something. He'd go back on the mountain and take him a pack with a little grub, and he'd build him a little campfire site back in there on them mountains, and he'd just leave that, you know. And he might go back to it a year or two later and go in there and fix him something to eat and spend part of the day and then come out. But years on down in the years, when he got to where he couldn't, you know, get around in the mountains good, he liked to sit around and watch for stuff. And they was right at the foot of the mountain, I mean the foot of the big mountain, on this side of Cades Cove, that mountain. On the foot of it, this old man, they had a trailer up there on this old man's farm, right in the foot of the mountain.
Rich Mountain?
Yeah, on Rich Mountain. And they had them a trailer there, and they built a porch out on the front of it to cover it. They'd go up there, they had a little old gas stove, and they'd take bottles up there and cook. They'd go up there, maybe cook breakfast and hang out a while, or they might go up there and cook supper, they might spend the night. Well, I got to going up there with this old man some, and he liked to sit and watch for coyotes, put some stuff out, you know, to draw them in, and there's coyotes all over that place. And he didn't have no lights or nothing rigged up, but it's so dark there where it was at. If you had a moon, you just had it for just a little bit, and then it'd be gone. You was just sitting right down in there. But he said he was sitting, he had him some bait out down there to try to bait some coyotes in. And he said he was just sitting there one night just inside that trailer door, and the porch was out in front of him, and the ceiling on the porch, and there was a board here. And I guess from that board to the ground, where you stepped off on the ground, it was probably 8 foot. But he said he was just sitting inside of that door with a shotgun, but had buckshot in it, and he was waiting to watch, see if he could see a coyote coming in there. He said he was sitting there, and there was a window right on this side of him at the end of that trailer, and he said he seen something come by that window. And he said when it got up past the corner of that trailer, even with the porch there, he said it was something standing on 2 feet. And he said its head was nearly up to that board. He said the thing had to be 7 or 8 foot tall, whatever it was. And he said the hair on the back of his neck raised up. He said, I was sitting there with a shotgun in my lap. He said it never once dawned on me to shoot this thing. He said, I know it wasn't no bear standing up. And he said it was just walking on 2 feet. And he said it was so dark there. He said it kind of stepped on down through there and got out of his vision. Said he had the funniest feeling come across him. And he said he felt like it's kind of a spiritual thing, you know. And he said he felt like the Lord had revealed to him, let him see that thing, just to let him know that there was stuff like that in them mountains. But now, this old man, I've known him, he has no reason to lie. He would not tell you a lie for nothing. He actually seen something, or it was in a vision he had or something. He told me a lot of strange things he'd seen and down through the years, and his mind worked different from a lot of people's. I don't know if these was visions he was seeing or he was really seeing this stuff, but you know, one of the fellas told him, said, well, you're sitting there, and he's bad to doze off, sitting there watching for coyotes. But said, you just dozed off, and that was a little dream you had. Well, boy, that made him mad. He said, that wasn't no dream. He said, I know what I seen. And if he was alive, he'd swear to this day that he seen a Bigfoot. I don't know.
And the head was taller than the porch, you see?
Yeah, it was standing at the end of that porch where you step off in the yard. It's standing in the yard. And that brace board that hold the roof up there, it was 8 foot off the ground. He said it was nearly up to that, standing there. And he said it was just walking on 2 feet. He could just see the outline of it. It's so dark.
Yeah.
He couldn't make out any features or nothing on it.
Huh. Well, that's a strange one. So,
yeah, he was all the time telling me about things he'd seen, you know, and strange encounters he'd had. And he spent a lot of time in the mountains, but a lot of people thought he was just dozing off and sleeping and dreaming these things, but he told me, he said, no, I know what I seen, you know, so I don't know, you know, but I'm kind of like you. If before I'd say, yeah, there's a Bigfoot, I'd have to see one, but I'm like you, I don't want to see one.
No, everybody, I've had so many ask me, Donnie, you seen any Bigfoot on your cameras? I don't want to see one because I know I got to go up there.
Yeah.
But no, that's a strange story. These people around this area, I know, just like any other area, that we don't know who they are, but they've seen stuff that they keep to themselves. They don't want to be ridiculed or made fun of. But another weirder story you told me here pertaining to these Bigfoots, it's something that's hard to believe in these old mountains, about these old guys killing an old hog and couldn't find trace of it. You want to tell that part of it?
Yeah. This old man that I know there that thought he seen one of them, he told me he was always, you know, he was always killing things, maybe set up of the night and bait a hog in there, an old wild hog, and kill it. Hot weather, you didn't want to fool with it, but he just kill these things, you know. And he just dragged them off up there somewhere in the woods. He told me he might drag them up there and roll them over in a sinkhole, or just drag them up there out of the way. And he said, I'd go back in a day or two, and he said, there wouldn't be nothing there. He said, not even a hair. And he said, it was just like that thing. Somebody just picked it up and carried it off. And he said, you know, if coyotes come in there and eat it, it'd be a mess there. Or, you know, if something drug it off.
Leaves wasn't tore up or nothing?
Leaves wasn't tore up. He said, you might see a little bit of blood there if there's any blood come off of it on the leaves. But he said, there wasn't no mess or no sign or nothing. And of course, him thinking he seen a Bigfoot, and he believed in them things. He just figured a Bigfoot come in there and just scooped it up and carried it off. But now,
what, about a 150-pound hog or something?
yeah, maybe 75, 125 pounds. But the strange thing about it, of course, I didn't disbelieve him, you know. I believed every word he told me. But this buddy of mine, he used to fool around with this old man a lot and do them things. They trap stuff and set up and kill hogs like that. He said, I've seen that, what he's talking about, John. This buddy of mine that I hunted with for years and still know today, he said, we kill a little old hog or something, and he said it would actually be too big for a bear to come in there and pick it up with its mouth and carry it off. And he said if it drug it off, you could have seen some sign, but he said we might go back up there in a day or two where we laid that old hog. And he said it'd be gone, and he said the ground wouldn't be tore up, the leaves wouldn't be turned over. He said it's just like that thing just vanished. And he said I've seen that before. And he said if we'd have had trail cameras and things back in, we could have put them up and seen what was going on.
Well, if it'd been any kind of animal tired up, they would tore it all to pieces. They'd be signs of where they've scattered it and all this stuff.
Yeah, there'd be a mess there.
There ain't no animal in these woods gonna pick up a 100-pound hog and just carry it off.
No.
Not even a man could do that. They'd drag it.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd make some kind of sign there, you know, where you, but he said there wasn't no sign or nothing there. No tracks, no nothing.
That would have been a good place for a trail camera, but you didn't have no such thing. You didn't even have cell phones or cameras back in the days.
Yeah, they didn't have nothing like that.
You just witnessed it. That's all you could say.
Yeah, this old man, he could tell you some of the strangest things, and like I said, he wasn't lying about it. I know the man. I know he wasn't lying to you. He said he was standing beside his daddy's bed when his daddy died, and he said when his daddy took his last breath, he said he seen the image of his daddy raising up out of his body, and he said his daddy was still laying there in the bed. But he said it was the image of his daddy just raising up. And he said it went right up to the ceiling. And he said, I looked up and it went right through the ceiling. He said, it's like the ceiling wasn't even there. And he said, I watched it till it went out of sight. And he's seen that. In his mind, somehow or another, he's seen that.
Well, I'm a firm believer, and I know some people that've got special gifts that God has given that normal everyday people don't have. There's just gifts like that, seeing things that normal people wouldn't see and stuff like that. Well, that's a good story, John. Didn't you tell me too that he was at his dad's cabin, and that old man was his dad, but he's at his cabin where his dad had died or something, and he seen him one time?
Well, it was his uncle.
Oh, was it?
They had a little old cabin off down there in the woods below the mountain, and they called it their hunting cabin. They'd go up there and spend the nights like that, and you know, cook, and sometimes they'd go hunting. And he'd come in off the mountain hunting of the night. He hunted a lot of the night with dogs, bear hunted. And he'd come in down there at that cabin, and his uncle stayed down there a lot and lived down there. Well, his uncle passed away. He told me one time, he said down there at the old cabin where they stayed, he said, I encountered my uncle 3 different times. And he said, I know it was him. This was after he died. He said the first time, he just had the feeling that his uncle was there with him. He said he just had a feeling that his uncle was there with him. He said he felt him. Well, he said the second time, he said, I heard him. He said, I heard something out on the porch. And he said, I went out there, and he said, there wasn't nothing around. He said, I heard something banging around out there. He said, there wasn't nothing around. He said, so I heard him that second time, but he said the third time, he said, I seen him. He said, I went in there one night from hunting. He said, got in there and built me a fire and stove, and he said, I laid down on the bed and covered up. And he said, I wasn't asleep yet. He said, there's something at the foot of the bed just jerked the covers off of him. He said, I raised up. Said he looked up, and he said, there stood his uncle. Said he was grinning at him. And he said, boy, he said, you gonna lay in bed all day and sleep? And he said, then he was just gone. And he said he's standing up there grinning at me. And that could have been, you know, that's where a lot of people said, you know, you dozed off and went to sleep and you dreamed that. And he said, no, I seen it.
That's the same guy that...
yeah, same guy that said he thought that was a Bigfoot he seen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Some people's got that gift.
Yeah, he could tell you some strange stuff that happened to him. And I don't know if his mind just worked different from a lot of people's, and he was having these visions and seeing these things, or it was actually stuff that, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't question his truth, you know.
Another mystery of these mountains, buddy. Thanks, John. Well, there you go. Old John. I love to sit around and listen to our elders, our old folks of these mountains tell these stories. They need to be carried on. And he's a good Christian man, too. So I want to thank you, John, for these little stories. And he's got so many more, too. A bear story, too, he told me while he was fishing. I'll share that in another video. But the most biggest mystery of these old Smoky Mountains is the people that's missing in these mountains. There's still 5 people unaccounted for in these old Smoky Mountains. Still a big mystery. I've made videos on these. You can go back and see them. But the biggest and most publicized of all these missing was little Dennis Martin, age 6, up at Spence's Field, just above Cades Cove. Still a big mystery. So many stories, so much fiction that you don't know what's truth and what's not. But the good Lord knows. The good Lord knows. I just don't know. But there's so many stories in these mountains. Now you can see here at this map that, Lord, there's so much country in these mountains, and this is just the western end of it, this 3D map. All the hollers, valleys, creeks, canyons. It's just unlimited, the country. And I'm a firm believer they see some of these little cracks and crevices and hollers in these mountains have never been stepped in. Of all these years, so much country here to get lost in. So there you go. These old mountains, I love them to death, but they are so ancient, and they have still, to this day, so many mysteries up and down these Appalachias that just can't be explained. So this is just another story of mountain mysteries. So I want to thank you for watching. God bless, and I'll see you next time.